Hi guys, welcome back. So first things first, if my voice still sounds a bit bad, it's because I was super sick last week. I actually completely lost my voice, I couldn't talk. So I'm still kind of recovering and maybe my voice won't be exactly the same as usual and that's why. So let's move on from that. So a few months ago I made a video that I will link in the iCards here about whether eating disorders were a type of self-harm. And today I wanted to do kind of a similar video about whether drug use/drug abuse was a type of self-harm. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So as usual, let's first start with the definitions. I have a whole in-depth video that I will also link in the iCards about the definition of self-harm and exactly what it means. It's quite an old video and it's quite cringy to watch, but if you want to see it and go really in-depth about each part of the definition, you can go watch it, I will link it here. But to make it short, the definition as stated by the ISSS is the deliberate self-inflicted damage of body tissue without suicidal intent and for purposes not socially or culturally sanctioned. Again, if you want to know exactly what it means because it can be quite nebulous, go watch the video first. So then I wanted to go over the similarities between drug use/abuse and self-harm. So first, they're both deliberate. You're not, I don't know, using drugs by accident like, oh shit, that was cocaine, that was not sugar. In most cases, at least, the drug use and the self-harm are both deliberate. You know what you're doing and you're not doing it by accident. They both are self-inflicted. No one is making you smoke, no one is making you drink, no one is making you use illegal drugs. Yeah, in most cases, you are the one in control and you're the one taking the substances. They are both done without suicidal intent, which doesn't mean that you can't have suicidal intentions or tendencies in another area, but the behavior you're having, or so like taking drugs or self-harming, is not as a way to kill yourself. So here we're not talking about someone taking an overdose to commit suicide or someone harming themselves to kill themselves. But now I want to talk about the differences. So first difference, if you ask me, is whether they harm the body. So self-harm clearly does, but do all drug use harm the body? I think we can all think about many types of drug use that do harm the body. So like we know smoking causes lung cancer, we know heavy drinking can be deadly, but some type of drug use don't harm your body or in very small amounts. For example, if you're just drinking a glass of wine, something like, I don't know, twice a month, I don't think that harms your body. So sometimes drug use does cause harm to your body, but sometimes it doesn't. And in this way, it's different from self-harm. The second way it can be quite different from self-harm is the culturally/socially sanctioned side. Something being culturally or socially sanctioned means it's something that is either appropriate in a culture or even encouraged by a certain social group. And actually a lot of drug use/maybe abuse in some cases is culturally sanctioned. Something like drinking wine in Europe. As someone who doesn't drink alcohol, I'm often the weird one and I'm the one not being socially sanctioned. And some other type of drug use are also culturally sanctioned in other parts of the world. In some parts, cannabis use is culturally sanctioned. In other parts, opium is culturally sanctioned. In this aspect, it's very different from self-harm, which is not socially sanctioned. And the next two aspects are aspects that I already talked about in my videos about eating disorders. Another difference is whether the bodily harm that results from the act is intended or is the first goal. Here is what the ISSS has to say about that. First, the harm that results from self-injury is an intentional or expected consequence of the behavior. Risky behaviors that could result in harm are typically excluded from our definition. In self-harm, the bodily harm is intentional and is the first intent. You're doing this to harm yourself. This is the first goal and this is intentional. In drug use, the bodily harm that occurs may not be wanted or may not be the first goal, like you know you're gonna hurt yourself, you know you might overdose, but this is not your first goal. Your first goal is something else. And the last point that can be different between the two is whether the harm is immediate or not. Second, self-injury usually results in some kind of immediate physical injury. Behaviors that do not directly result in injuries are usually excluded, even though they may be harmful or dangerous. For instance, food restriction is typically not considered a form of self-injury, since the associated physical damage tends to build up over time instead of happening all at once when the behavior occurs. Most of the time, the harms from drug use build up over time. You're not getting lung cancer by just smoking one cigarette. So now, for the conclusion. There are some situations where drug use and self-harm can overlap, like a tiny bit on event diagram. It can happen. But here are the 4 main points that can help you tell if this type of drug use is actually self-harm. First, does it cause bodily harm? Second, is it not courtually sanctioned? Third, is that bodily harm the main intent? And finally, is the damage immediate or does it build up over time? If the answer to any of these questions is no, then it's not classified as self-harm. Now, that doesn't mean that the drug use is not a problem, it doesn't mean that it's not self-destructive, it doesn't mean that it shouldn't be treated or anything like that. It just means that it's not self-harm, it's drug abuse or drug dependency or drug use disorder, as they say now. I think that's how they say it, drug use disorder. Or substance use disorder, I think is how they say it. Basically, it doesn't mean it's not an issue, it just means it's not the same thing. And if we want to keep moving forward, we need to separate things to make it sure that this thing gets treated properly and this one gets treated properly. Because if they have big differences, it means that we can't treat them the same, we can't give it the same answers, we can't give it the same treatment. That's why I make videos about is this self-harm, is this self-harm. It's not just to be like picky and technical and, well, it's kind of for that, but my main point is that we need to give specified treatments for self-harm. Just because 2 disorders have similarities doesn't mean you can treat them the same. And if you try to treat them the same, you most likely won't be able to treat them well. My main point is that self-harm can't be treated like you treat an eating disorder, and it can't be treated the same way you treat a drug use disorder. We need specific treatment, we need specific resources, we need specific training, all of that. Both are serious conditions, but they're not the same. We need to know they're not the same, so we can treat them both as they should be. So that's it for today. As usual, if you don't agree with what I'm saying, please leave it in the comments so we can have a discussion, because I'm not God and I can be wrong sometimes. Shocker, I know. If you want to chat with me, you can also hit me up on Instagram. The link is in the description. I answer every DM I get, and I will see you next week. Bye guys!